Well, the story was really very much to do with language, how deaf people had been dismissed and denied legal rights until the 1750s, when the first attention was paid to their language. De l'Épée, who was a great priest in Paris, thought that their language was the language of Adam, a universal language. Of course, it wasn't. There are hundreds of different sign languages, but he learned French Sign Language. He established the first school. Within 20 years, one had educated deaf people who themselves wrote and taught. And life was revolutionized for deaf people, first in Europe and then in the States, until 1880, when the use of sign language was banned from education.
Looking at the importance of sign, there was a phrase in your book, language transforms experience, and how the learning of sign for a deaf child or for a deaf person transforms the world and allows them to understand abstractions and make connections that otherwise would never happen.
Well, of course, this is happening for most of us, say, in the third and fourth year of life. Deaf people may not be given good access to a language they can learn easily, and so one can have the appalling possibility of an intelligent person without good language. And I saw a number of deaf children like this, and I was haunted by
very
what could
sad
happen
stories.
to them. Yes, and not simply difficulties in communication, but as you say, difficulties in abstraction, in intellectual development, and a sort of confinement to the immediate and the here and now. And one needs language to break out of that box, to get access to the world of meaning and culture. And certainly a sign language will do this as well as any spoken language. But you must have some language, and when you're very young.
A hearing man and a hearing woman met, fell in love, got married, and had a baby. Hello, hello. Our baby is deaf. 90% of all deaf children are born to hearing parents. Doctor, what do we do now? We can teach them to be normal. All deaf mutes can be taught speech. Speech, speech, speech. Ball, 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 ball.
Beep, ow, ow, day, we, you, buckle. Beep, loudy, man, loudy. Beep, better.
Doctor, what do we do now? You should speak and sign at the same time. Total communication. You should use Signed Exact English, SEE, total communication. Total communication, SEE. We will use Signed Exact English now. See?
I am to seeing moon, the moon is to seeing me.
The various systems of signing English are not true languages. They were developed not through regular use by deaf people, but through arbitrary decisions made by committees of educators. Signed English lacks the power of the system of rules created by many generations of deaf people. And the task for a person attempting to speak and sign simultaneously is overwhelming. A person will typically begin to focus on the speech portion of the signal and omit signs randomly. So, most of the total communication is largely unintelligible by deaf children.
The time is much brighter now, but still ASL is not used in American education. There's still this signed English, which is supposed to be for the deaf, but it's not easy to understand or to make. It's not a good language.
And as you said, it doesn't have the structure and the syntax and all of the tools that a language should have.
No, and it has no potential for art. They need to have a good first language. Everything else can come on top of that. It's possible that fluent speech, certainly there should be fluent reading and writing. Every deaf child needs to be bicultural and bilingual, and maybe fluent speech and lip reading. But it's devastating to a child not to have a good language. I think technology has a great deal to offer deaf people. I think videotapes can to some extent become the books of deaf people. All sorts of wonderful signed performances need to be preserved on film or videotape. It's possible that the use of computers may make more possible a form of written sign language, though whether deaf people would like that or not isn't quite clear. But with things like cochlear implants, one sees statements like, with the development of the cochlear implant, the deaf schools will be cleared out in a decade. And this is a sort of statement which outrages deaf people because they see it practically as murderous in intent. And it's a purely medical statement. And I think deaf people, must always maintain this linguistic community and the special culture of their own. Well, although the university was given its charter by Lincoln in the 1860s, it had never had a deaf president. And apart from Edward Gallaudet, who founded it, it had never really had a president who was fluent in sign language and who really knew what it was like being a member of their community and culture. And they felt very strongly that they needed one of their own to represent them and to understand them. They felt that they had always been denied this by hearing people, that they'd been patronized, been told that they must have a hearing person in charge. And so last year they made this statement very clearly and strongly and politically, no, we want one of our own. A deaf person can also be president of the university. And although I'm not a political person myself, I was intrigued by this event and sort of went down and found myself part of it. It was full of passion and energy, and also I think a sort of good humor. And as everyone knows, it was completely successful in a week. And
who is the president now?
The president now is a man called King Jordan.
He's deaf.
Yeah, he lost his hearing from a motorcycle accident when he was 21. And his own speech is reasonably good, or indeed very good, as is often the case with people who have spoken first and then become deaf. But he is also beautifully fluent in sign language, and I think now thinks in sign language, and is a very complete member of the special linguistic community of the deaf.
We want to have hearing people respect us and see us as peers. That's our real desire. We want to be seen as normal people.
And so we choose Greg Leibach to represent so many other deaf people. We would hope that this week represents more than a victory for just the hearing impaired. Perhaps by disturbing the peace for a few days, these very determined young people have had a lasting effect on the rest of us. With luck, the rest of us are a little more humane. That's our report on World News tonight. Have a good weekend. We'll see you on Monday. I'm Peter Jennings. Good night.